Come on. Okay. I just gotta wait for this one. Okay. And there. Okay. Noisy birds outside. All right, I think I got everything set. And here we go. Oh, wait, I forgot to pop out the chat so I could read it. That would be helpful. There we go. Let me see here. Got VJ Morph coming in from Australia. We've got morning from beautifully overcast Toronto. Good afternoon from the UK. Good morning and hello from the bold coast of Maine. Feisty Crabman here in the house. Average Painter. Sundered Psyche. Moderator Matt. Hello from Chicago. How you doing, Matt? Hope you're doing well. I'm going to see you soon in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Is that Car Wars as your thumbnail? Great game of memories. Yes, that's actually a little bit what I'm talking about today. Because they did a Kickstarter, and I finally got all my stuff yesterday. Well, no, Friday. Good afternoon from Portugal. Got a fine Canadian Thanksgiving. Oh, yep. Puerto Rico. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way, to Ron. How you doing? Let's see here. Jacksonville, Florida, Illinois. Very sunny Wales. Bit of a surprise. First time stream. Looking forward to it. Well, absolutely. Glad to have you. Let's see here. Berlin. We've got Indianapolis. Cleveland, Ohio. Florida. Loving the shirt. Oh, yeah. I just put on a button-down shirt. It's rare. Let's see here. Sergeant Major, how you doing? From Alberta, Canada. Another beautiful day in deep South Texas. Morning from a stormy Wisconsin. So up here it's pretty nice right now, but yeah, it rained basically. It rained pretty much all day Friday. Just not a lot, just some, mostly. Just everything was just damp. Everything's been damp all weekend. I wake up like this morning to take a shower and my towel was still damp from yesterday, and so yeah, just damp. Greetings from Bavaria, 9 p.m. here in Thailand. Isle of Wight, Cincinnati, Nottingham. Painting my Battletech core box this morning, nice. Checking in from Missouri, Budapest. Morning from Grey, Scotland. Mexico, Sweden, Michigan. Finishing my final few Zombicide figures while listening, nice. Speaking of Kickstarters. Me, close to a launch with Kickstarter. I'm intrigued as to why you're done with Kickstarter. Well, I mean, the title has kind of two meanings. Number one, like I said, Friday I got my Car Wars Kickstarter deployment. No, that's not what they call it. I don't know. Pledge. I don't know. Whatever. The stuff that I ordered on Kickstarter a long time ago that was very, very slow because, well, pandemic, obviously, which is totally understandable. Second, Steve Jackson games. And I've not done a ton of Kickstarters from them. I've done technically 2, but both of them have been wildly late, and I think that it's kind of standard, but whatever. And then the other Kickstarter that showed up yesterday, actually, was Empire's Fall from Gaddis Gaming. And so that one was, I'm pretty sure, on time, or real close to it. So that's very cool. Do you keep a pin map from where your listeners are from? No, I should. That'd be cool. But yeah, the Kickstarter thing. So the title, like I said, has two meanings. In that, A, I'm done with Kickstarter. Like, I don't have any more outstanding Kickstarters. But I also don't see myself doing any Kickstarters for a while because of a lot of different issues, which I'll talk about in a little bit here. All from France, Belgium, Idaho, let's see here, Syracuse, Liverpool, letting glue dry on a 5 model unit of Custodes in Virginia. Nice. Salutations from sunny Portugal. Nice. Good morning from Missouri. Eagerly awaiting my BattleTech pre-order from Barnes & Noble. Wow, that's cool. Just switched from 40K to Pike and Shot. Is my Boomer card in the mail? Is there a number to call? I think that they call you. I'm not sure on that, actually. Yeah, like I said, and I think I've mentioned this before, like right around the age of 42 is all of a sudden when I became, at least for a little while, interested in historical games, and I got into like Flames of War. It wore off, which is weird because it doesn't seem to a lot, at least from what the great wargaming survey that Wargame Soldier and Strategy magazine, WSS magazine. I think it's Wargame Soldier and Strategy. They do the great wargaming survey every year, and that date or that age, about 42, seems to be sort of average for when you seem to get interested in historicals. But it's not average that then you then kind of fall out of it, which I kind of did. So I think the situation was more of a, for me, it was a bit of a perfect storm in that I became interested in the concept, and also had a bunch of friends that wanted to get into Flames of War at the same time. And then partially it was then that kind of drying up, that friend group. I mean, I still am friends with those folks, but we all kind of just sort of like, and we didn't play that much anymore. And then also it became a situation where I was not as interested in playing historical stuff because of the actual real history of it, whereas I'm still got interest in World War II type, like alternate history, weird World War II, that kind of stuff. I'm interested in those types of things. One of the reasons why I picked up Empire's Fall, that Kickstarter, is A, because Lee's a friend, but B, also because it's alternate history kind of World War II, so I'm interested in that as well. Painting 15mm 5 parsecs from home. Xenothal Prime contrast paint, highlight done. Indeed. That's the way it goes. I got to be honest, I was a little surprised. I don't know, other than the fact that Friday's video was obviously very, very out of focus, which I'm still... It sucks. Yeah, I don't know. Whenever I do a tutorial or something along those lines, they just don't seem to get the views. Over time, I think they do. But I'm kind of amazed by people who are just like, nah, and it's fine, but it's interesting, like, because I get asked for tutorials so frequently, and then I do one, and then they don't really get much traction. So it's interesting. I thought that this one would probably do a bit better, but over time, I think it probably will. Very disappointed Myth and Gold Kickstarter was canceled, although if they bring it back with a full standee-only pledge, I'll be happy. I mean, we might, like, that's another thing, too, is I think we're going to see a lot fewer Kickstarters, at least for a while, because of the global shipping problems, we'll just say that. But yeah, that I could definitely see being a situation where, just the people that I've been talking to in the industry, like during Gen Con, I've been hearing stories of, like, we used to pay $5,000 to basically fill an entire shipping container with all of our games being produced in, say, China, and then get them shipped over here. It used to cost $5,000, and now it costs $30,000, and so if you can get one. The president of Monster Fight Club mentioned that he was used to paying $4,000 roughly, and then he got one recently for $18,000, and he was absolutely ecstatic because it's kind of crazy. So I think that you're going to see a lot fewer Kickstarters because the supply chain from China is just drying up right now. So that'll be interesting. I've never done a Kickstarter because I really dislike the concept of the more you pay, the more you get. I get why they do it, but for some reason it angers me. Yeah. I think that's interesting too. I seem to have dodged the historical war games bullet. 53, and the closest I'll get is Turnip 28. I don't think that counts. No, that's certainly alternate history with the kind of Napoleonic people with the plants growing out of them. That's definitely not real, which is cool. I dig that. I can't get dry brushing to work. It seems like full paint or no paint. I mean, I was gonna say it takes a little bit of practice. It doesn't take too much practice though. It's generally, you put some paint on the brush and then you take a piece of paper towel. I think paper towel is kind of important. If you use like just a piece of like typing paper or copy paper or printer paper, it doesn't have the amount of teeth or tooth, I guess technically is the proper term, to kind of grab the paint off of the brush. It could also depend on the brush you use too. Take a look at cheap makeup brushes. That's what I use for most of my dry brushing, and it works really, really well. Let's see here. I'm mainly backing 3D printing Kickstarters, no shipping backup for files. That's true. That's also a very good point. Yeah. Used to be $2,500 to ship a container. Now it's $20,000. Yeah, yeah. Hey, Emily, how you doing? I can empathize with having so many feelings around a blurry video. Just to know your content is always banging, and a little blur doesn't change anyone's enthusiasm to watch you again, my friend. Well, I appreciate that, Emily. That's very nice. I think people watch tutorials when they are at the point they needed to watch. Yeah, that's definitely the case. Is that, like, if you're like you do a tutorial. Excuse me. You do a tutorial about like how to paint a power sword, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's cool. I'm not painting power swords right now, so I don't need to learn that. But later on, when you're like, how do I paint a power sword? You type it in to YouTube or Google or whatever, and then you find it. So the velocity is velocity is like when a bunch of people watch your video very early on, and then there's what they call the long tail. The long tail on those videos is better. The velocity is not. YouTube is much more impressed by velocity than long tail, though. So that also, like, if it doesn't get a bunch of velocity, then they don't show it, and then that just becomes a cycle of you not seeing it, and then but I think I kind of thought, because it's such a general thing, like it's not just like how to paint power swords, it's like how to get started painting, and you should do it this way. That's why I was kind of thinking it was going to pull more views initially right off the bat. Came here for miniatures, and now we're talking global supply chains. Well, that's where your miniatures come from, as it turns out. So yeah. Do you have any tips to paint Space Marines? I think the dry brushing is too messy for those kinds of minis. There's much edge highlighting. I mean, I dry brush my Space Marines, but I, again, use a big fat makeup brush. So it does help. Two things. Number one, Xenothal Prime, and I'm generally Xenothal priming the color that they're going to be. So if they're Ultramarines, I'm going to use, instead of black, maybe like a very dark blue, and then the ultramarine blue color sprayed from above. So now they're already pre-shaded, which is nice. And then if you do want to do some highlights and stuff like that, it's a little bit of dry brushing with a big fat makeup brush with most of the paint gone, and it's going to take some patience, but it will, in my opinion, look better than edge highlighting. A lot of edge highlighting, unless Sam does it, frankly, most edge highlighting, including my own, has a tendency to look too thick. Sam is a magician and a wizard, and a magician wizard, and so his edge highlighting is a lot different. But yeah, definitely. Paper towel is key for dry brushing. Don't use microfiber cloth either. Does not grab enough paint. Wow, I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, I just have always used paper towel. Is the whole shipping chaos and costs making local production more viable? That would be cool. I mean, it depends on the stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I think that printing, really, here in the United States, we have a decent amount of printers. Injection molded plastic is still a thing, but kind of, I was sort of talking about that a little bit recently, about that CO casting, where they're doing the injection molded plastic instead of into a metal mold, it's going into RTV rubber molds, and it's kind of a new thing. When I talked about the models from Monster Fight Club for Cyberpunk Red Skirmish game and the new Borderlands game that they're going to launch, that's also a Skirmish miniatures game based off the video game, those are all CO casted, and evidently Corvus Belli is starting to use CO casting for their plastics, and there's a bunch of different companies that are starting to do it, and the upside is you can do it like John from Monster Fight Club said that they were producing the stuff right there in the warehouse where they keep all their stuff and they do all their shipping and all that. It's like they've got these two machines over in the corner, and that's where they're cranking out the models. So that's very cool. I listened to your last video, audio only, didn't hear the blurry image at all. Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Do you see a return to large battles a la Warhammer Fantasy in the next couple of years? Not really. No. I got to be honest. I mean, specifically for me, absolutely not. I have no interest in playing a big army game ever again. They're just. I don't need that many models. I like Skirmish. I like having. I'll paint an entire army's worth of models, but I'll do it this group, this group, this group, this group over time, as opposed to I need to paint an entire honkin' army so that I can play this one game. I'm not interested in that. And I don't think I'm alone. There are certainly some people out there who will definitely be interested in that, and there are people out there who want to play Kings of War and want to play, 40K at 3,000 points or 4,000 points and stuff like that. And that's cool, don't get me wrong. I just don't think it's the way the industry's going, because I think the industry understands that Skirmish is an easier sell. If I tell you, look, you can play this game, it's super cool, you're going to need 100 models, and it's going to cost you $1,000 plus all the time and the effort to paint and build and all that jazz, versus, look, here are these models, they're going to cost you less than $100, and you got to paint 8 guys or whatever. That's gonna work out. I think that is working out better for some people, I think. Wargames Atlantic is going to U.S. manufacturing hard plastic. Yeah, I'm a little astounded that GW's not putting a facility in the U.S. From what I swear I saw a chart not that long ago saying that the U.S. was the biggest market that GW sells to. Closely followed, I think, by the UK, and then I want to say maybe Germany, but I could be wrong on that. Admittedly, they would then have to make multiple molds, but that shouldn't be the end of the world. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. I would just think over time it would be easier if they started to produce here in the United States and in the UK, and then, then that way they wouldn't have to ship stuff. But I don't know. Good question. Same as absolutely a magician wizard, but though way larger biceps than your average caster. That's true. He's definitely pumping iron. Saw CO casting at London Game Expo. Nice. I got into 3D printing last month, and I'm currently looking into Kickstarters for STLs. There's at least no physical shipping. True. I am still sometimes surprised when there's a Kickstarter for STLs. I mean, I don't know. It seems to me like if you... in that situation, it's a marketing thing, just straight up. It's companies, well, people like me, I guess, for some reason, not like me, but you know what I'm saying, whatever, people who make videos on the internet, blogs, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to say journalists, because Lord knows. But when you do a Kickstarter, it seems to get more play in the press, for lack of a better word, than if you just go, hey, we released a game that's done and you can buy it now. I don't know why. It seems to be, I don't know if it's the will they, won't they make their goal kind of situation that makes it a little bit more tasty to people who want to watch that kind of thing. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what it is. But like trying to get like a news outlet in the gaming industry to talk about a thing that's been released is a little bit harder than to get them to talk about, oh, there's a Kickstarter. I don't know. It's interesting. So I know it is a marketing thing, and that's a thing. Let's be perfectly honest here. I am not against Kickstarter. The most recent Kickstarter that I got, which I got the box on Saturday from Empires, or it's a game called Empire's Fall, which is from Gaddis Gaming. Gaddis Gaming is a very small kind of two-person sort of concern, and it's a project that would probably not have gotten launched without the Kickstarter. And that's exactly what Kickstarter's for. And I'm completely pro Kickstarter in that situation. It's when big companies are like, oh yeah, we're going to do a Kickstarter again. I'm not going to name any names here, but they're called Cool Mini or not. And that drives me a little nuts. And I don't want to go down that road anymore, particularly for that kind of situation. Now, there's a downside to that, though. And I'm not going to... Although this is, I think, very specific. Let me show you an example here. So the thing that I finally got on Friday, Car Wars from Steve Jackson Games. I played the heck out of Car Wars in college. This is a very different game, but this is, it's still about cars and they're warring, don't get me wrong, but it's a very, very different game as far as the actual mechanics of it and all that kind of stuff. This new game is very much more like Star Wars X-Wing, in my opinion. Whoops, wrong window, hang on. Let me click on this. There. So, you get actual plastic cars now. Back in the day when I played it, you played it with a little rectangular cardboard printed car, just a little piece of rectangle, like chipboard or whatever, not even chipboard, cardstock that had a car, drawn on it, and you move that around on a grid piece of paper basically, and you played that way. And now it's played like on a gaming mat, and you have these cars that are about the size of like Hot Wheels or Matchbox cars, and then they go onto a rectangular clear plastic base, and then that's how you know your firing angles and all that kind of stuff and whatnot. The thing that's interesting is, so now they're like, okay, well, the Kickstarter's done, but if you want to buy the stuff, you can just buy it now. So here's the Double Ace box, okay? The Double Ace box is the box, so it's got the core game and several expansions. It's a bunch of stuff and all that kind of stuff, and it's very cool. The suggested retail price on it is $375. When I did the Kickstarter, this level was, I believe, $150. So now, generally Kickstarters are a good deal, and that's one of the big selling points to them, and I get that. This, I believe, is completely related to the troubles that we're currently having with manufacturing and shipping and all this kind of stuff. This game, like I said before, just a month shy of a year late, which, again, that's what you get with Kickstarter pretty much most of the time. But I think that the reason that these prices, these actual retail prices of buying this stuff right now are so much higher than the Kickstarters is because of the amount of it costs to ship this stuff due to all these new problems and probably manufacturing. And there's a lot of things going on there. And so I think that's part of why these particular pieces here are so much more expensive than the Kickstarter was. But you get I believe the term is a metric buttload of cars. Don't get me wrong. You get 12 cars in the core set, and then you get 10 more, and you get road tiles and a bunch of stuff came in this box. It was a very large box. Not as large as the box that I got from them back in 2014 or whatever, when I bought Ogre 5th or 6th edition, whatever the most recent it did. That was a 27-pound box that it was very large. But yeah, so this is kind of interesting, but you're going to see, I think, a little bit more of this where the Kickstarter price might be considerably cheaper in some situations than the, at least for a while, than the retail price. I mean, you might even see stuff that just doesn't do retail. That's also a possibility. Where the heck is my chat? There we go. Oh dear, everything's scrolled. There we go. GW doesn't get a factory in the US because the actual factory are in China, only dispatch are in UK, and they're not forced to label a box made in China and Europe. I swear they built I'm pretty sure they built a new factory in Nottingham or whatever, but I know that some of the terrain gets done in China, but I think that the normal boxes and stuff like that, like here's a box of Gretchen's right here. Let's take a look. Manufactured in the UK and distributed by Games Workshop. So, I don't know. I mean, this isn't necessarily the newest box, but it's the newer style, though. So, yeah. But I know that some of the terrain is getting made there. But nonetheless, I think that it would make a lot of sense. Because I swear they used to have production in the US. Years and years ago, they used to have a production facility in the US, but I could be wrong. Kickstarter has a big FOMO angle. That's true. Fear of missing out. Yes, that is true. There is a lot of that, obviously, in Kickstarter as well. That's for sure. Can you take us through your thought process when you found all the blurry footage after taking it off the SD card? I tried to think if I could figure out a way to get it and redo everything, and I did not have the time. I got done with work. I went and filmed, came home and ate dinner, and then sat downstairs, and it was probably 7:30, and I was like, okay, now it's time. And I actually, before I sat down to edit, I shot a couple more like insert pieces, and then it came down to like, now it's time to edit and get ready to, and then I discovered, and then I was like, oh, this is... So I was trying to think about, like, am I just going to like replace it, film something down in the basement, but trying to get all the parts that I had kind of done and followed. I rarely use notes when I do these videos, but I did have a bunch of notes. I could have tried to get close, but I don't think I would have gotten all the things in there that I wanted to kind of remember again. That's always kind of the problem whenever I try to like refilm something, and it happens from time to time. I forget something that I said in the first video, or I add something in the second video that I didn't mean to, or something like that, and then I have to shoot more ad. It's a whole thing. So, like if I was working off of a script specifically, word for word script, I could have probably reshot. I probably would have gotten it edited and ready to go in time, but it was a situation of just not really being able to do that. So, there are easy things to cover with Kickstarter: how much money it raised, how fast, how many backers, what type of pledge. Sure, I mean, yeah, I mean that's something that people talk about. That's true. I've had models back ordered for months from GW buying the sketchy Russian recast is starting to look appealing. I'm always against recasts because it's. I mean, here's the deal. If you need to, and I know we're talking about a huge multi-billion-dollar corporation, but if you're like, I need that particular model, and I will get pirates to make it for me instead, then I don't know that you need it. Personally, that's just me. I'm against recasting. So, and if they don't have it, if the company that if it's on back order, it's on back order. That's, I don't know. I'm personally, I'm not going to do a recast in comparison to that. I rarely do Kickstarter, but my next will be Resident Evil 1 this month. Is it a board game or a video game? Let's see here. Russian recast companies only search for Rackham models anymore. I mean, there's eBay. Was watching Vince Ventrella's Motivating Painters review video, and he was talking about BattleTech, but with mechs the size of GW Knights. Now Snarling Badger Studios must make this game. Well, I mean, licensing sounds like it's real difficult. Vince has been talking about that for a while. Vince is he wants to paint he wants to find good STLs, good legal STLs of actual BattleTech miniatures that he could then print off, 10 inches high. And then do something with. And I don't know that like the thing is there's nothing out there that's a big scale for BattleTech guys. BattleTech guys are generally like a little taller than 28 millimeter scale. Or they're a little taller than 28 millimeter models. They're obviously like 6 millimeter scale because they're supposed to be 30 or 40 feet tall or whatever they are. But no, he's mentioned that to me before too about trying to find these right things, and I don't know. That's a good question. But yeah, so the sculpts would not just, you can't just take a sculpt this big and blow it up that big and get like decent detail and like little extra. So that would take a bit of work though. Page 46, the Kill Team Octarius book, it says Sergeant Veteran can wield a power weapon. What is a power weapon, and is there a part for that to put in his offhand? Power weapon is but they're basically talking about a power sword in this situation. It used to be there was a difference between power weapons. A long time ago there was none. There was just like, a power weapon's a power weapon. And then they were like, well, I think it was in 6th edition, they were like, oh, a power maul does this, and a power axe does this, and a power sword does this, and blah, blah, blah. So a power weapon is just basically the piece that you use in the Kill Team box is basically this sword. It's like an electric sword, not like a lightsaber, but it gives you an electrical shock. It's like a taser and also a knife. I don't know exactly, or maybe it's like one of those big vibrating things that you use to cut a turkey. It's kind of like that, but for people. Yeah, but that's the part that they're talking about when they're talking about a power weapon in that particular thing. 100% agree with you on big war level games and not going back. Also, I'm absolutely in love with Cyberpunk Red Skirmish game. Going to be playing that more than the new Kill Team for sure. Oh, that's cool. I have not gotten a chance to play it. I should probably see if I can find a battle report somewhere for Cyberpunk Red Skirmish. I got to be honest, looking at just like the pictures of it, there's a lot more cards and tokens than I generally like in a miniatures game. But I should still take a look at it, I suppose, because I do own a bunch of the miniatures now, and I think their miniatures are cool. But yeah, we'll definitely have to check that. I should check that out. Whenever I plan a Kickstarter, I plan into the goal the ability to to probably produce after Kickstarter. I mean, it's a good idea, I think, because I've seen Kickstarters before that, like, afterwards they're like, well, there's no other place to get it other than there, or else retailers are like, all right, now we might be interested. I've also seen retailers who are like, we're not interested in getting the Kickstarter stuff in store because we know everyone who actually wanted it bought it through the Kickstarter. So if we buy it and then put it in our store, it will sit on the shelves for most situations. Not all, but in some. I mean, I think that Zombicide had enough legs that it was still something that people still to this day buy in the store. But I can tell you that a huge portion of the people who are interested are trained now to go to the Kickstarter and buy it, and then they're not going to buy it in the store. So, didn't they used to make a huge Mad Cat? They used to have a big giant Mad Cat in their booth that was probably 4 feet tall, but that was like a one-off kind of fancy thing. But I don't know if they ever 3D printed that. I know my friend Mac, the maker, on the internet, I know he works with the folks from Catalyst sometimes, and I know he's 3D printed bigger miniatures. This was kind of a strange term there, but probably a foot tall, if not maybe a touch bigger. But I don't know where he got the files from. I think he might have they maybe made him the files, or else they gave him some files and then he embellished them to make them at least have a little bit more detail at a bigger size. I'm not sure exactly. I also hate watching companies like Mattel that could afford to produce without crowdfunding turn out a game like HeroQuest and use crowdfunding. The funny thing about that, and I think that's maybe Hasbro instead of Mattel that did that, but either way, Hasbro not only was like, oh, I don't think we can produce this HeroQuest without using crowdfunding, even though we're Hasbro. Not only that, they didn't want to pay the fees to Kickstarter for Kickstarter, so they built their own version of Kickstarter so that they could use it just internally, and it's called Hasbro Pulse. So basically, they didn't want to pay Kickstarter, so they just had the money to build their own version of Kickstarter for their own products, but they needed to kickstart or crowdfund HeroQuest, a well-loved board game that's been, capitalism. Anyway, so that was kind of crazy. They are also, and there was a part of me, frankly, that was like, because they're using that same service, that same system, whatever, Hasbro Pulse, they've got, I believe they're the ones that are doing the Nerf Pulse Rifle it's basically a replica of the Pulse Rifle from the Aliens movie, the second one, but it's Nerf, so it's all, bright yellow and crap like that and shoots darts. But I was just like, man, I kind of want that. I really do, but I kind of don't want to go through all that stuff, and I don't really know that I needed a Nerf gun, but it's pretty dope. So yeah, I don't know. My own Kickstarter was moderately successful, and now I'm officially a working artist. Thank you so much for all your encouragement. And that's exactly what Kickstarter's for. It's exactly for small companies that are like, I can't make this without this system. And that's what crowdfunding is for. So don't get me wrong. I'm not against crowdfunding, and I'm not against Kickstarter. I'm against big companies like Hasbro and Cool Mini or Not and stuff like that, who they just use it as basically a marketing thing, or basically they're like, I just want all the money up front for this product, but I also want that marketing push and the FOMO and all that other stuff that comes with that kind of crowdfunding. I totally get that. Hope the weather is treating you well up there. You're not below a foot of snow already. It's like, Jason, it's like 70 degrees. No, we're fine up here. Actually, like I said, it rained a good portion of Friday, and it misted and sort of sucked most of the day yesterday. Everything's still damp outside, but otherwise it's fine. I backed the Terrain Essentials book, only physical product I've backed. I arrived late, but it was well worth the wait. Yeah, I mean, that's a Terrain Tutor, and again, that's a thing that wouldn't have happened. Like, I don't know that. I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure that Mel and the publisher would have not been able to produce that book without getting the Kickstarter to happen. And that's exactly what Kickstarter's for projects like that. I'm having Gen Con flashbacks of bad purchases. I can understand that. I missed your topics video. That was 2 weeks ago? Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Thought you could talk about games with unique activation and initiative rules. Maybe games like Rain and Hell. I really like the system that Vince came up with for the activation in Rain and Hell in our game. But yeah, I think that's not a bad idea. As far as giant mech STLs, you got to imagine that buying the models from someone is probably going to run fairly high as well. Sure, yeah, I can understand that. Let me see here. Most reviews I've seen of Kickstarter board games are variations on a theme of loads of lovely models, but the rules are awful, the game is overpriced and way too expensive. Well, that's a bummer. I don't... have I ever bought a Kickstarter board game? Well, I did the... years ago, I did the Giant Killer Robots board game from Weta Workshops? Weta Games? Whatever they call themselves at this point. And that's technically a board game, but it's pretty miniature-y, but not like super miniature heavy necessarily. That seems to be a big thing right now in board games, is that like there's lots and lots of miniatures in them. And yeah, I was just talking with a friend of mine about that recently, about is that a good thing or a bad thing? Or is it just kind of, what it is? And I don't know. I mean, I like a good gateway game to help get people into miniatures, but I think that sometimes the miniatures like look super cool when you're like ready to click that little button on Kickstarter, and then you get this box full of miniatures and you're like, oh man, and so I don't know. It's interesting. Armorcast made 10-inch tall BattleTech miniatures in the early 2000s. Wow, that's pretty cool. Hasbro Pulse was around before HeroQuest. Was it? Yeah, you're probably right. But still, just the idea that they're like, oh, we're poor Hasbro, we don't, we need to crowdfund anything is a little crazy. And then they decided that they had the money to build their own crowdfunding platform. Let's see. There was Resin Mad Cat that came out in the 90s. It was 4 feet tall. That's very large. 4 feet tall is a very large Mad Cat. Good lord. Kickstarter literally changed my life. In 2017, I launched the Hobby Holder, and oh, hey, Kit, how you doing? I know Kit. And by the end of 2018, I was able to quit my job as a graphic designer. See, that's the stories that I like to hear about Kickstarter, and that's like the benefit. So it's interesting to see that kind of stuff, and I would like to see more of that on Kickstarter. And Lord knows that there probably is a lot of it, more than you hear about on Kickstarter, but what you mostly hear about is these big companies who are doing these big giant Kickstarters that are $3, $4, $5 million or whatever. From what I understand, board gaming is still like the biggest category in, or tabletop gaming, let's just say, for lack of a better term. Tabletop gaming is the biggest category in Kickstarter still. I think that's partially because it is easier to make a board game than it is to make a digital watch. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because one of the very first Kickstarters I ever backed, way back in the day, was this thing called the Pebble, which was this like smartwatch. It was an early smartwatch that used an e-ink screen, and then it attached somehow to your, via Bluetooth or whatever, to your phone, and you had the app on your phone, and then when you got an email, your wrist would vibrate, and you'd look at it, you could see it, but you could also look at the time, and junk like that and all that stuff. But it was e-ink, and so it didn't need to be charged too frequently, and it was a whole thing. And that was one of the first Kickstarters that, like, one of the early Kickstarters that got up over like a couple $1 million and stuff like that. But to produce the digital this and that and the screens and the testing and all that stuff in comparison to doing a board game. Board games are still not easy, don't get me wrong. Tabletop games are not easy, but they're way easier than getting printed circuit boards manufactured and this and that and all the other kind of stuff. So I think that's one of the reasons why you do see a decent amount of tabletop games on that platform and not so many electronic things, because electronic things you need a huge team generally, and it's... Whereas a single person can do a Kickstarter for some sort of tabletop product sometimes. Manufacturing is a different story, but even electronics manufacturing is even more. I think it is raining again. Let's see here. They sold a Jabba's sail barge. Jabba the Hutt, yes. Why did I say Jabba? Jabba. They sold a Jabba's sail barge through a flu. Oh, yeah. No, I know a guy, like a big Star Wars guy, who got that. He posted about it on Facebook. And, like, when the box came from, like, FedEx, he turned it up on its side, and it was nearly as tall as he was. It was massive. I think they had it. I think my local comic shop ordered one too, and they had one in stock, but I don't think it's there anymore. I think someone bought it. Not sure if I'm going back to the recent Zombicide Undead or Alive. I think I'm a little Zombicide exhausted after Zombicide 2.0. Still paint those little minis. Yeah, the minis are fun to paint if you get into like the kind of the rhythm of it and stuff like that. One of the earliest videos that Sam did on the channel was about how to quick paint Zombicide miniatures, and so it's still a thing though. Let's see here. I've backed a total of 3 Kickstarters, and none of them were board games. I've always seemed all flash and little substance to me. Yeah, I haven't done too many Kickstarters in general. Was the Hero Quest thing any different than taking pre-orders? I thought that they had like stretch goals and stuff like that, and I thought that there was a goal, like we have to hit this point, otherwise we're not going to do it. But I could be wrong. But just the whole concept that they decided, well, this is the way we're going to do it, I thought was kind of weird. Anyway. Crow Industries does BattleTech in 15 mil scale instead of 6, and their stuff is amazing. Oh, it's got to be a good deal larger, sure, yeah. Someone's publishing MechWarrior Online mechs, but cannot tell if they're legitimate. They might just be like them taking the models from the game and then tweaking them and extrapolating them somehow to make STLs out of them, and that sounds sketchy. You may be right to think about whether or not that is legitimate. I can see that for sure. That alien Nerf gun is so cool. I keep having to talk myself out of it. Yeah. $100 though? Yeah. They're doing all kinds of cool exclusives from Pulse, but it seems like actual toy stuff is overpriced. Yeah. Annie's latest one from Bad Squiddo looks great. Yeah. Annie from Bad Squiddo Games, I mean, that's exactly the type of person, that's the type of organization that Kickstarter was originally, I'm pretty sure, designed for. Absolutely. Whoops. Everything scrolled again. I remember the Pebble. Indeed. It was a great watch. I wore it quite a long time. Some board games definitely have superfluous minis just to get the Kickstarter dollars. I like the word superfluous. VJ Morph says, I backed the Pebble. Literally just threw mine away when I was doing some cleaning yesterday. Who'd they get bought by? The Fitbit people, I think, bought Pebble eventually. Steve Jackson Games canceled my pledge for Car Wars because I'm in the UK. Is that a Brexit thing? Did that happen relatively recently, or was it... that's weird. I had not heard about that kind of thing. That's interesting. Listen to your podcast this week. I think most tabletop games have played their share of video games. I think that video games can be a gateway to our hobby. It's amazing when that happens. I gotta be honest. As a person who's played video games, for years, I don't play as many as I used to. I used to be much more video game heavy. But I'm amazed when a person who's been a video gamer this entire time gets to a point where they play a video game, let's say it's Dawn of War, and they're like, you know what? I should buy a bunch of those little plastic dudes and start, gluing them all together and then start painting them. But it happens. It's surprising to me, but I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody walk up to me like at Adepticon and say, hey, I really like your channel and everything, and you're like, oh, that's great. And then you ask them like what they're doing or what they're playing and stuff, and they're like, oh, I'm in the 40K tournament and all that. And I'm like, oh, that's great. And they're like, yeah, I got into 40K because of Dawn of War. Like, that's how I started into it, and then I got into painting because maybe I was watching your channel or watching other channels on YouTube. And I'm just always amazed when, like, that step, like, it obviously doesn't happen for everybody because otherwise we'd be... tabletop games would be a much larger industry than it is, but it does have a non-zero definite effect, which is very interesting. Let's see here. I'm always surprised at how many companies on Shark Tank haven't shipped any products but have made millions on Kickstarter. Yeah, well, yeah. I remember watching one time. I don't generally watch that show, but I came across a clip on like YouTube or something like that. But it was a guy who had invented these like stickers, little plastic clear stickers or whatever, that you put over your nostrils, and then stuff can't go in there. And it's to help like things like I don't know, like allergies and stuff like that. And it's clear, like kind of in like a matte finish, and you don't really see it that much, but you put it over your nostrils and everything. And like everybody on Shark Tank was just like, this is the dumbest idea we've ever heard of. Like, why would you, who wants to put a sticker over your nose so you can breathe through it to filter out stuff and all that? And then he was like, well, I have, and he just started rattling off all these big orders to all these Middle Eastern countries who are like, we would like to keep sand out of our nose, thank you. And then every single one of those investor people on that show all of a sudden changed their mind very quickly and was like, oh. And you know what I mean? Because that's the type of thing. You can look at it from one angle, but... And I got to be honest, it's a little weird that the guy was on Shark Tank when he already has all these orders and stuff like that through, you know, but nonetheless, it was just very interesting because I'm just like, I don't know about the stickers on the nose. And then as soon as he's like, oh yeah, keep sand out of your nose. And so the Middle East is very interested. And I was like, oh yeah, no, that's, I had not thought of that. That's a good point. Yep. But I'm not the guy sitting up there in the comfy chair at the top, at the front of the stage there, you know, yammering away about how it's a terrible idea. I was just thinking to myself, I don't know if I would use those on my nose. That seems weird. And I got allergies, but yeah. So it's interesting to kind of see that kind of funding, and a big portion of Kickstarter is to, you know, it's like you're standing in front of thousands and thousands of potential Shark Tank people. They're not making obviously nearly the investment or whatever that the folks, you know, on a Kickstarter are making, but that people on Shark Tank are making, but you are still trying to convince these people this is why, and that's obviously a skill. But when you're a big company, it's a little bit easier because you can do a lot more fancy schmancy video, and you can do this and that and the other thing, and so yeah, it's an interesting place. Just reprimed some minis from Arcadia Quest, gave them a Xenothal highlight, still learning to get enough white on the mini. Going to have to take them back down to my paint room and add some more. That's the issue that I have very frequently is in my mind's eye, I'm expecting to see a much more, you know, white to gray to black. And in a lot of situations, you want it to be the darker colors. First of all, you barely want it to be black anywhere. Like you spray everything black and get black into all the nooks and the crannies and get it all set. And then you spray this kind of like white all over it, and that obliterates most of it. And this is one of the reasons why I prefer to do it, you know, with an airbrush versus rattle can. But you do that, and then, because like, if you get that real dark shadow underneath the arm that's being held like this, and you've got like skin tone, whatever skin it is, green skin, you know, like that lady that I was talking about this on Twitch on Friday, that Ogre Witch or whatever. Like I kind of failed on that Xenothal because she's got this arm up, she's holding this shield or whatever. No, she's holding a cudgel. I don't know, and it goes from being like her greenish skin tone, and then right about here it just goes to black because I didn't get enough on the underside, so there wasn't enough of a gradient. And that's, I think, the hardest part sometimes with Xenothal is understanding that you want much more gradient and much. It's not just spray straight down from above, because you will get very harsh lines where, you know, paint landed here, but it didn't get anywhere under here. So you go from white to black, and there's just this line, and you don't want that. You want to kind of feather it a little bit more. Is electronic manufacturing very much harder, or are we just less familiar with the field? I assume the infrastructure exists and you can just hire a company to realize your design. Well, I know I can make a tabletop game because I did earlier this year. I know me and Vince couldn't make a electronic watch. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, yeah, sure, very possibly you're paying people, but I think that, you know, and they're working for you and doing these things maybe at the manufacturing level, but it is a situation where I think that there's definitely there's a much bigger skill set for doing electronics versus doing, you know, printed stuff. We kind of talked about that in the Game 4 podcast recently too, about how it is much easier to produce a tabletop game of whatever flavor, RPG, board game, miniature game, than it is to make a video game, because video game, you have to know a lot of programming and there's a bunch of other things that go on and involved with that. Whereas like literally making a book, like I needed to know how to use InDesign, which is not super difficult to use. It's a piece of software. We needed to know how to be able to read and write. I needed to be able to get, contact with some artists and stuff like that. So there is still a skill set, but I feel like the skill set is easier to do this than it is to do, some other Kickstarter or electronic product or whatever along those lines. So yeah, which is one of the reasons why I like tabletop games, is because I can actually make them if needs be. At the start of COVID, I picked up Dawn of War 2. I loved it, and 2 months later, after watching this channel in Squidmar, now I've got 3 of my friends into Kill Team and 40K. Love painting minis. See, that's very cool. I'm always amazed by that kind of stuff. Hey, 52 Miniatures, how you doing?
Freaking squirrel.
There's a squirrel on the bird feeder. My wife is not happy about it. But yeah, so in that situation, I think that going from the video game to the tabletop is, I think it's people. There's it could be a situation where it's people who are going to maybe end up in tabletop anyway, but it's not for everybody, obviously. And again, I don't want to gatekeep in any faction, but I know that there are people out there who, if you sat them down and said, look, we're going to build this, I'm going to show you how to do it and all that kind of stuff, they would get to the end of it and have a little painted model like at a convention, if you're like a paint and take or whatever like that, and they'd be like, well, that was pretty cool. And you're like, hey, would you like to do that yourself and build an army? And they're like, no, that's not, I'm going to go play a video game or whatever, watch a movie. But there are people out there also, obviously, that are like, I would like to buy and hoard paint and brushes and all this, and that's great. That's what I like to do. Turn-based strategy games like XCOM would be great as a tabletop. Board game that they did missed the point of actual tactical gameplay. I remember seeing the board game in stores, but I never played it. Excuse me. Let's see here. I'm enjoying my SPI City Fight, over 40-year-old game, still exceptional. SPI brought out great games in the old days. That's also a big benefit too of tabletop games, is that we can just say, okay, we're gonna, you're gonna play it 40 years later. You can do that, not a problem. Maybe I will stick with Kings, not going back to the old world as Panathor rocks. Nice. I was thinking about trying out Oathmark. I think a decent amount of minis per box and lots of variety despite basic sculpts. I own 2 of the Oathmark miniature boxes or whatever. I think I own Skeletons and Goblins, and they're nice models. They are decent models. Oathmark, I'm not interested in Oathmark as a game particularly because it's rank and flank, but I'm glad that because I know there's still an audience out there for it. A cudgel, I guess. Tabletop Minions is a weapons scientist now. It was the word I could think of. It's like a big stick, and then there's a ball on the end of it, and it didn't have spikes. It just had nubbins. I don't know. It's a weird looking weapon that she swings. Harsh lines might be good if you're going for a Frank Miller Sin City kind of art style. True. I could definitely see that. Someone is making a miniatures game for the Borderlands video game franchise? Yes. Monster Fight Club. They make predominantly pre-painted terrain, but they also did a skirmish game for the RPG Cyberpunk Red, which was called Cyberpunk Red Skirmish Combat, I think. I know it has the word skirmish and Cyberpunk Red in it, and the last word might be combat, but I could be wrong. But yeah, they announced at Gen Con that they're making a skirmish game for Borderlands. They've got a licensing deal with Gearbox yeah. And so they showed off some of the models there, and you could buy, you could buy a claptrap. They had a little claptrap that they had sculpted and whatnot and everything. And it was a nice little model, actually, but they were selling those there too. Let's see here. I've just invested in an airbrush after Xenothaling with spray cans for a while. Using white ink over black is a dream in comparison. Don't think I could ever go back to flat undercoats. Yeah, like I said in that video, I talked to Sam and I talked to Vince, and both of them are like, yeah, we generally always pretty much. One of them, and I don't remember if it was Sam or if it was Vince, but I think it was Vince, said 99% of the time he's going to Xenothal. And I do the same thing. I'm almost always using Xenothal. I did actually paint some of my Car Wars cars that came in the Kickstarter thing. I painted a couple of those yesterday, or at least started to. I primed them, and then on some of them I kind of did Xenothal, and then other ones I was going for more of a... I was using some Turbo Dork, like color shifty kind of paints, and they ended up... The thing that's interesting is they ended up looking a little bit more like Matchbox cars. So I don't know if I'll do that again. I think for a lot of the other ones going forward, I'm going to try to make them look a little bit more grungy, because you know how I like to paint grungy. So I think I'll probably go forward and paint more grungy on the other ones, and I don't know if I'll use as much of the Turbo Dork there, because it turned out really cool, but they look like Matchbox cars now, because they're all bright metallic and stuff like that, and I'm like, that's not exactly the look I was going for, but it's fine. That's why my university started their game design students off with designing a playground game. See, yeah, I think that's if you go into a game design, I would think personally, if you went into a game design class and the first thing you did was like, all right, we're going to design a game for Windows, or we're going to design a game for the Switch, that's going to probably, you're not going to be thinking about game design as much as you're going to be thinking about, computery stuff, for lack of a better term. Yeah. Wish Dawn of War 2 was on iPad. Well, that'd be kind of cool. Squirrels are impossible to keep out of feeders. Yeah, this one, well, yeah, they're tough. Having trouble knowing the motions for Xenothal could be a video guide to revisit. I mean, it's a situation of just, like, you don't, if this is the miniature, you don't just go, because that's not going to, you always want to keep the brush moving. With airbrushes in general, you pretty much always want to keep things moving, because that helps to make the fade and the blend. If you just point it at the model and just pull the trigger or push the thingy down and just go spray, well, that's how you get, too much paint in one spot. So you always do want to keep the airbrush moving at all times and not waving it around like a dark like me. But I'm saying you want to keep it pointed to the thing, but you do always want to keep it moving. And then the other thing that's important too is if this is the model and you're trying to Xenothal, you're generally trying to go more, not straight down necessarily. You do want to get some straight down, but you think of it like as a cone. If this is the model, there's a cone that goes up from the model that's maybe, so if this is 90 or 0 or this is whatever, this is 45, I would go generally 45 and just make a cone that goes all the way around that model, and that's kind of where your airbrush is going to stick. Now, the other thing you could do instead of moving the airbrush around like this and spilling paint all over is you could also move the model and just try to visualize that cone in your head. But that's really what you're trying to do when you're doing the second layer. When you're doing the first layer, where you're trying to get the dark color on there, that is just trying to shoot it into every nook and cranny, as I mentioned. And there you go. So I've never used Indiegogo. I kind of assumed it was just a money grab. I don't think I've used them either. I've seen plenty of their stuff, but I got to be honest, there's times when you're like, oh, this is an interesting new product or whatever, and you're like flipping through, let's say, Facebook, and then you look closely at the sponsored thing that talks about this new thing. You're like, oh, I would be interested in checking that out. And then you see the link that says Indiegogo, and I'm always like, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. COVID gave me Blackstone Fortress and then off to the races with minis in general. Oh, I see what you're saying. I was like, at first I thought Blackstone Fortress gave you COVID? That's weird. No, I get you. Yeah, the pandemic in general, I get you. Yeah. That's cool. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Sadly, no more red squirrels this far south. The grays are wiping them out. Well, now you're making me think of, like, squirrel combat. You know what I mean? Like, they meet together in a field and there's just a big fight. They're probably wearing armor. What do you think of the new Black Templars? I mean, I don't know. The sculpts are nice. That's not surprising, I guess. I haven't looked at the book at all. I was a big Black Templar fan. Like when I was first, not when I was first. So my first army was Tau, which then I sold. Then I got into Chaos, and then I got into Black Templar. And one of the reasons I liked Black Templar was because you could. I liked the concept sort of the army a little bit, and also I really liked that they sold this box that was just a whole bunch of extra cool custom bits for Black Templar stuff. The tabards, the special shoulder pads, the doors to put on your rhino, all that kind of stuff. They used to sell this really nice little box. And I bought a bunch of those and built a whole bunch of Black Templars and started playing with them unpainted, as I was getting ready and building more stuff and I was going to start painting. And then right around then was when they got rid of the Black Templar Codex. So it went from being like, oh, this is cool, to being, oh, we just kind of folded a couple of units for Black Templar into the regular Space Marine Codex. I hope you don't mind. And then I was crestfallen to some degree. So then I decided, well, since I haven't painted really any of these, other than maybe like 5 or 6 test models, I decided, well, I'll just turn them into my own custom chapter. They've already got the shoulder pads and all this stuff on there, but I changed the colors. I gave them bluish armor, a little bit lighter, but not too much lighter than, say, space, like Ultramarines. And then I gave them silver shoulder pads with a lot of black wash on them. And I called them Silver Cross because I didn't know what else to call them. And I did some of those, and then it didn't, and then I kind of got out. And then 7th edition came along, and I really didn't like 7th edition very much. And so, yeah, I don't know. I was going to do, when 8th edition came along, I built a complete 2,000 point army and was about to start painting it again, and then just Kill Team came out and I got more into that, and those sat there, and then I was like, well, maybe I'll get them commission painted, and I kind of bounced around a lot, and now they're still sitting basically in a little plastic tub, about 2,000 points of Primaris. They already got all the fancy shoulder pads because I went on to Shapeways or one of those places and got it's basically like a Maltese cross kind of thing that's already shaped to just glue it right onto the shoulder pad, and I did all that. And but yeah, so I guess it's good that they finally got their own codex again, except it's not really their own codex. It's one of those supplemental codexes, so you still need the Space Marine book and this book, which I'm just not. Yeah, so like I said, the models are pretty good looking, although those like weird neophyte guys have got bad haircuts and they should probably get their money back from the barber. But other than that, the models are pretty cool looking. So there's that. Try shaking your fist in an angry motion. Squirrels hate that. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Mecha squirrels, robot squirrels. After years of painting minis, I find Xenothal to be highly overrated and pretty much a waste of time. And that is a controversial opinion. I mean, that's your opinion, and that's cool. I like it because I like to paint with transparent colors, and it saves me a bunch of time and makes it look like I know how to blend. And that's, if you do the Xenothal and then cover everything with opaque colors, it's a little bit of a waste of time. I'll give you that. But if you are using predominant, like when I do Xenothals, I'm doing the majority of the model then in contrast colors, which are transparent, or glazes, like Secret Weapon glazes and stuff like that. Or I'll use just straight up washes in some certain spots, shades or whatever they call them over at GW. And then that does save a whole bunch. That does save a whole bunch of time. The capes that I just did on the Chaos Warriors, the Slaves to Darkness Chaos Warriors that I'm currently working on for Warcry, those capes were like super fast because I did the black and white Xenothal and then I just threw a green tone wash from the Army Painter over the top of them, and it looks blended and everything. It's great. But yeah, if you paint everything completely opaque, then Xenothal can be a useful guide to kind of show you where your highlights and your shadows should be, but it's not as useful as when you use transparent paints. Let's see here. Blackstone Fortress gave you COVID. That doesn't, yeah, I wouldn't think so. I hope not. I recently moved to Vancouver-ish from Halifax, and there are so many black squirrels. I saw a black squirrel a couple years ago here. They're not too frequently around here, but I did see one. Could you do Xenothal priming using gray and white as opposed to black and white? Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people that prefer to use gray to white versus black. I like my stuff to be a bit darker, which is why I like to go with the black generally. But yeah, Xenothal can be basically any kind of colors as long as they're just two colors and one is lighter and one's darker. When I did my Death Guard kill team, the Xenothals I used, or the colors I used to make the Xenothal were, the base color was a dark green from Krylon's camouflage line of spray paints. There's like 6 colors, and there's 2 like military greens. There's like a lighter version and a darker version. So I used the darker version and I sprayed those models completely. And then instead of using the lighter version of green as the Xenothal color, I actually used a light tan color, also from the camouflage line. So it was a weird thing where it went from like this kind of tan to green, which is you don't usually do that. You don't usually go from a warmer color to a cooler color in your Xenothal, but they're Death Guard. They're supposed to be sort of disconcerting looking. They're supposed to be a little gross, but like that will generally, in most situations, going from a warm to a dark color in a Xenothal like that will make the model look a little weird, but they're Death Guard, they're Nurgle, they're supposed to look weird, so it actually worked quite well. I covered everything in a wash, which kind of ties it all together, but it worked out. For that particular situation, I think it worked out really well. But in most situations, you usually try to stick with either warm colors or cool colors for both of the colors in the transition there. Heading to Valhalla this year. I think it's going on right now, isn't it? But no, if it's not, I'm not. I wasn't able to make it this year, but I thought it was going on right now. I could be wrong. I'm beyond excited for the new box. I'll probably buy at least 3 of the upgrade sprues. Nice. New startup Kickstarters are the most worrisome, especially when they start posting that they've met their goal and now they'll be setting up a shiny new office. Yeah, no, that's... yeah. I mean, no, yeah, well... So if it's like a tabletop game company, yeah, I don't know. If you're talking about a huge... Yeah, even then, a huge amount of money doesn't seem like a good idea. Yeah, I think the big fancy office is it's the thing you want to wait for when you're starting a new company. Let's just say that. After Rain in Hell, we need Attack on Feeder 121. Robo-squirrels attacking a feeder base with genetically modified birds. I don't know where you get the models for that, but yeah. Doing Xenothal is so fast that the ease of reading the details of models alone makes it well worth it for me. Yeah, I mean, that's a reason that some people use it, especially just for kind of being able to pop out the details a little bit better, even when you are going to cover it all with opaque paint. I like to pop out the details and then not hide that stuff with the transparent colors, but again, that's not for everybody. Have you seen the Army Painter release their own contrast paints in 2022? Yes. I mean, they obviously don't call them that. They're called something else. Speed paints? I think they're something like that. But I did see something on Instagram maybe, or Facebook. No, it was Facebook. Yeah, it was Facebook. I saw something about that. So that's cool. I'm interested in trying those out. Uncle Adam, what do you think about the cool mini or not minis from the Wrath of Kings? I believe the Nasir, or is it Nazir? Nasir? I'm not quite sure. Clan is perfect for Rain in Hell. They're also discounted on the miniature market. Yeah, there's a lot of people who've been using those miniatures from Wrath of Kings for Rain in Hell. At least people have been talking about it, like on the Facebook groups and stuff like that. I liked my favorite was House Hadros, the kind of the weird sort of fish people, pseudo fish people. I liked that. That was a great game. I really enjoyed that game. I was really bummed that they basically decided that they were going to stop making it and then put all their eggs into the Dark Age basket. And then that basket got dropped on the ground, and so now they don't make miniature games anymore. That's a bummer. The camo line is Chef's Kiss. I agree. I really like the camo line. Squirrel is tasty. If you fry it, the leftover grease makes really tasty gravy. Too bad I can't have carbs anymore. Squirrels have a lot of carbs? Usually meat doesn't have a lot of carbs in it. I suppose if you deep fry it, then maybe the breading. Just tried light tan over red brown Xenothal for some average or savage orcs, not average orcs. Average orcs are completely different things, but savage orcs. Contrast orc flesh over that coming out really nice. Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine, friend of mine who really was like, well, after Contrast came out, I like messed around with it a little bit, and I was like, this does not impress me. And then a friend of mine sent me pictures where he had taken some orcs and he had primed them brown and then sprayed them white from above and then threw like orc flesh or one of the green colors like that on there. And then he's like, check these out. I painted these in like 45 minutes. And I was like, oh, I had not thought of the Xenothal thing with Contrast. I don't know why. I think it was because they were so much, like in the early days of Contrast, they were pounding the idea, you buy one of these two primers, either Wraithbone or Grey Seer, and then you spray it on there, and then boom, there you go. Now and then you paint your contrast over it, and then you're all done. And I just thought that everything that was just done that way didn't look that great. Personal preference. But yeah, so I think it'd be interesting to see. I think they'd be smart. Well, I keep thinking that it'd be smart of them to start trying to push that whole kind of concept about how to make stuff look better with Xenothal, or with using Xenothal, whatever. But they don't really push a lot of airbrush stuff at their place. So they make airbrush paints, but they put them in weird pots and not squirt bottles. Anyway, whatever. But yeah, it's very cool. Maybe you're actually at Valhalla now, and this is just a previously filmed video. I think you blew my mind, Diaz. No. Have you ever gone to PAX Unplugged? No, but I keep wanting to. Partially because it's in Philadelphia, and we've got family in Philadelphia, so we can kind of two birds, one stone sort of situation. But no, I keep meaning to, but have not. I did mine with sky blue to help with the colors. Painting in brighter colors and not so grimy, it helps a lot. Nice. Sorry if you've done a video on this, but could you recommend the Kill Team? Would you recommend the Kill Team Octarius? Or is it Octavius? I think it's Octarius. Either way. Box to a brand new Kill Team player. My FLGS has them and it's piqued my interest. I think yes, because you're going to get everything you're going to need in that box. And as long as you're cool with just playing with those two groups, I think Kill Team's still basically pretty good. The new version of Kill Team is pretty good. I was very unhappy with the compendium. So if I want to use the other armies other than the two that are in that, which is the Veteran Guardsmen, aka Death Corps of Krieg, and the Orc Commandos, if you want to use any other armies, then I don't think it's as good of a... It's just not... Yeah, at least not for me. I don't like the army lists that I was given that are in the compendium that you had to pay $50 for. But if you use the army lists for the forces that are in the Octarius box, they're actually pretty good, because there's a lot of... Like, you can take a spotter, and you can take a sniper, and you can take this, and they have all those differentiations of different types of models that have special abilities and do things and stuff like that. Whereas in the compendium, you don't have really a lot of special abilities. You don't have any like specific call-out models too much. There's a couple armies that've got little things here and there, but like especially with like Space Marines and stuff like that, it's just like, oh, you take five of these guys, that's your army, boom, you know. So yeah, but yeah, Octarius is still, I think, a decent. Plus, like I said, it comes with the terrain and the board and the dice and the book and all that stuff. So it's not bad by itself. My concern originally for the game was looking at it from the big picture and understanding that if you wanted to play any other forces other than those two that came in those box, you weren't going to be probably happy with the choices. And that, at least I'm not. My girlfriend does ghost hunts, meaning I do them now too. We went to a Civil War battlefield. I saw the biggest red squirrel ever. It was Chihuahua sized. That's a big red squirrel. Are you sure it wasn't a ghost? Could have been a ghost big red squirrel. I don't know. But that's big. Like, we get sometimes squirrels, especially at this time of year, they get big because they're, bulking up for winter. But not Chihuahua sized. Just moved my stash of shame from one room to another and realized that I'm with you on large game armies. I'm sticking with Kill Team so I can get stuff done. Yeah, it's about getting things done, but it's also about being able to like switch between projects, as opposed to like, I'm just not interested in being like, well, this year I'm painting this entire army or whatever, or this 6 months maybe. It depends on how you do it. I like to be able to like, I'm going to work on these guys for a while and then work on these guys that are totally different, possibly for a different game. Maybe not. Maybe, like for Warcry, I can hop around a whole bunch. I already have. I've got Night Haunts for Warcry, Nurgle Dudes for Warcry, Skaven plague monks for Warcry. These are all 3 painted armies that I have currently for Warcry. Well, war bands, not armies. And Stormcast. And I'm not finished yet, but I'm nearly finished with my Chaos Slaves to Darkness dudes. The 5 guys I've been working on Twitch, those are all done. I actually finished their bases yesterday. So Monday on Twitch, let me push a button, boop. Monday night at 7 p.m. on Twitch, being tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central Time, I'm going to start working on the 2 other guys for that warband, which are going to be a Chaos Lord and a Chaos Lord riding a big lizard dog, whose name is... Well, his name is Vinny, I think, but it's actually called... it's a Crackadrak or something. It's... Anyway, Crack-a-Ding-Dog is what I've been referring to it. It's a model that I kind of don't like. Like, it looks okay. Building it was so bad that I eventually threw it away and then went onto eBay and bought somebody else's that they had built it but never painted it. And then I had to scrape all the mold lines off of it and everything, but then that's what I'm going to be painting. It's that steed is just so weirdly designed. I could not get all the parts to seat properly, and it's covered in spikes, so it's very hard to hold it together while the glue dries because it's very pointy. So yeah. Anyway, I'll be working on those last 2 pieces, but the rest of that army is done. So that's what, 5? I think it's my 5th Warcry warband, and then I'll do a different one. I've got Cities of Sigmar to work on for that. What other things was I going to do for Warcry? I was thinking about another Skaven band using Stormfiend and a bunch of clan rats and stuff like that. So I just like being able to hop around between projects like that, even within the same game, and that's one of the big benefits of skirmish games, in my opinion. I spray Wraithbone, then Agrax all over, then Dry Brush Wraithbone, and then light Dry Brush White. I find it is good underpaint, pre-shade, and my aging eyes can see what the F is going on. Well, that's pretty cool. Huh. It's a neat project. The only thing about Wraithbone and Grey Seer, there's 2 things that I'm a little... Number 1 is that they are like satin finish, which I know is to help make the contrast flow around better, but it's still... I'm not sure about it. Secondly, those cans are like $20 a piece. Or maybe more. They might be 25 now. When they first came out, they were $20 cans of primer, and I'm like... So I don't know. I should probably give them a try again, but I'm not sure. Cool Mini or Not has a bad track record of supporting their games. That's why I'm wary of getting into the Game of Thrones game. Do you think that one will stick? I mean, it's been going for a while now. I have a suspicion that they probably have to be a little bit wary about dumping the game because they're paying for the licensing. Because it's not technically Game of Thrones. It is A Song of Ice and Fire, which is the book. Game of Thrones is, I guess, the TV show. So I don't know what the licensing deal looks like, but I think that, like, if it wasn't something that they licensed, I wonder if they wouldn't have just at this point been like, oh, look, a bird, and then, like, stopped paying attention and stopped supporting it. But because they're like, well, we had to pay all that money for the license, we got to keep trying to recoup that money. Maybe that's why they're still supporting it. I don't know. Because they've been supporting it for, well, supporting. It's been available from them for at least a couple years, maybe more than that. No, it's got to be more than that. 4 years maybe now? I don't know. Yeah, maybe 4 years. Anyway, we'll see. But, you know, so far so good, and that's good. I'm glad. I'm wondering if it's also got a tipping point where they're like, we will stop supporting a miniatures game, if it doesn't make this goal by this time. And very possibly Song of Ice and Fire did, and then so they're like, okay, well, cool, we'll keep making stuff. That could be a part of it as well, certainly. Painting the same stuff all the time is mind-numbingly boring for me, probably why I can't do Space Marines. Sure. Making more space in your room so you have less focus on some models you're about to work on. Squirrel Primarch. Ooh, that could have been a Primarch. Very good point. I miss the early days of 8th edition 40k where you could just go play several kill teams of Imperium models in a single army. Yeah, I liked 8th edition. I haven't played any 9th edition, and there's reasons. I just, after reading everything, I'm like, yeah. I mean, it's also I'm just not interested in running around with a big army full of stuff anymore. But I don't know. I feel like personally, and this is just me, and I'm just in my opinion, I feel like both 40K and Age of Sigmar have gotten more complicated than they maybe need to be a little bit with the new additions. So there's that. It makes sense why GW is trying to push kill team specific models over basic models with no abilities, since the Warcry warbands are now underpowered compared to the ones that can just make it home. I keep hearing that. I haven't run across that, but I haven't played a ton. I think if you play in tournaments and stuff like that, maybe that's where that data is coming from. But I played Skaven against Sam's Unmade. No, maybe it was Unmade. I don't know. It was one of the Warcry specific, and he stomped my butt. So but I'm not a particularly good player either. So there's that. So yeah, I don't know. I have a suspicion it's just them wanting to be able to sell new models, whereas they look at Kill Team the way it was before, and they're like, well, there are some people out there that are just buying, models to use for Kill Team, which is great, and maybe they'll eventually use them into 40K. But there's also people out there who are just using the models that they already had, and that we can't have. So So I think that's part of the reason why they decided to make these kind of fancy things like that and make it so that the regular models were. Let's see here. Why is it that tabletop gaming chats always seem to gravitate towards culinary pursuits? Happens here and on painting happy little minis of surprising regularity. What was I talking about? Or somebody else was talking about food? Was I talking about food? I don't remember. I had a dream that a hive tyrant was riding a Games Workshop brush. Huh. Karkadrak, I think, is probably the proper spelling. That sounds right. It hurts to assemble. It does. It's completely covered in spikes, and yet you still have to try to hold the multiple parts all together. It's really, like, as I was reading the instructions, I'm like, did they seriously cut this thing up into that many pieces, and why? It was very strange. What's the deal with Kickstarter, Adam? Well, I had a couple of Kickstarters that showed up finally. One was on time, and the other one was not. But it's fine. It's COVID. I get it. But those are the last two Kickstarters that are outstanding on my, stuff. And I was just talking about how I don't really see myself doing a lot of Kickstarters for a while. Partially because I'm not a big fan of big companies using them. I think that small companies absolutely should be using Kickstarter because that's what it was designed for a small company that's like, we would like to make this product, but we don't have the money up front. We just don't have the money to do it. We can't make it without this kind of crowdfunding, as opposed to big companies that are just like using it as a pre-order system. But secondly, most Kickstarters that are going to be shipping you a physical product are going to be in trouble this year and the next probably because of the overall shipping issues that the entire planet seems to be having, and manufacturing issues, and just supply chain in general. We were talking a little earlier about how, like, the shipping containers, like when you get something made in China, you don't get it sent to you via UPS. You fill up a shipping container, or you have a company fill up all your product into this big giant shipping container, like the ones that you see go by on the trains and stuff like that. And then that gets put on a boat, and that boat gets sailed over to wherever, probably, let's say, in the United States, if you're a company here, and then you just, get it finally, eventually, on the back of a truck, usually, and then you take those products and then you ship them out to the people in Kickstarter. That shipping container now is incredibly rare for a lot of different reasons that I'm not necessarily here to talk about. And because they're rare, they're very expensive now. So it used to be $5,000 to rent a shipping container to get it shipped from China to, say, Port of Los Angeles or Long Beach or something like that. And now it can cost 5 times as much. So, you'd be paying $25,000, $30,000 for a thing you used to pay $5,000 for. So now as a game company, you're like, well, that's not cool, So, yeah. So that's another reason why I'm not seeing myself hopping on any Kickstarters for a while. And I think that we're going to see Kickstarters in general slow down because a lot of companies that are like, we'll make another board game and do a Kickstarter of it and it'll be great, are like, well, now we can't afford to because we can't charge somebody $300 for this Kickstarter because that's what it's going to cost us maybe or whatever, so we can still at least get our decent profit, and people aren't going to want to pull that trigger, which I totally understand. I really appreciate satin finish these days. I'm not too big on high prices though. Yeah, well. I like contrast paint over gloss Nuln oil. I own some gloss Nuln oil, and I've only used it in a couple of circumstances. GW rattle cans are still $20, but some of them are 30. I swear to God, like at my local, not GW store, but my local independent store, I swear that, is it Retributor Gold is like a $30 can, or maybe it's 25. It's. I was surprised at how much it cost. Let's see here. So, but anyway, the Kickstarters that I got were, I did Car Wars, because I used to play Car Wars back in the day. In college, we played Car Wars nearly every Friday night, and this is the new version of it, and it's a very different version. It's not just like a reprint or whatever. It went from using little cardboard chips, basically, that had a car, like the top-down drawing of a car on it, and then you would put it on graph paper, like these big pieces of graph paper you would unfold. That would be your arena that you would fight in, and you would play that way. And you had an 8.5 by 11 sheet that had all your stats and your weapons and your tire quality and all that junk on it. I went from that to Matchbox or Hot Wheel sized plastic miniature now, sitting on a colored clear plastic base, and then you're playing like on a 3 foot by 3 foot game mat with no grid anymore, and you're using cards for your weapons. So if you're like, oh, I got a missile launcher in the front, I got a flamethrower in the side, and I've got a mine dropper in the back, and then you have this. Do they have a drawing or a thing of it? I don't know if they do. This thing here. So they have these things now. These are the things you set in front of you, and they are like, so you have these, it's like little sliders, these little cardboard pieces. Like this is sunk in, so that it's 2 layers. So you have the main layer that's the entire thing, and then there's the overlay layer, which is, both of them are thick chipboard, but the top layer has holes cut in it for like these slider tracks. So you have these little things here that tell you like how much armor you have on the front, how much armor you have on each side, and how much armor you have in the back. And as you start to take damage, you slide these things down to track all that. You slide your speed and your power and all this kind of stuff, and then it tells you how much damage you're maybe going to take, or if you're going to be more likely to flip, or how your tires are doing, and all that kind of cool stuff. So, yeah. And then these are the plastic, clear plastic doohickeys that show the actual outline of where the car is, but then you put these cars on top of them. You just sort of like snap them on there. You don't glue them, you snap them. So I've started painting some of these. Actually, I haven't started painting those. I started painting these. Yes, I started painting these yesterday. I'm going to start painting the other ones, but yeah, I've already started working on these. Another thing is they don't have little weapons that you snap on, so the cars are not going to be particularly WYSIWYG, because you can build your own cars. But yeah, there's just a ton of stuff in the box. There's a zillions of dice. I'm a little bummed about custom dice, but you know, what are you going to do? There's a zillion different cards that show your different types of people and the different weapons and stuff and all that kind of stuff. So it's a very different game than the old version was. And that's probably a good thing, because I don't think that players these days are super interested in the old ways, which is fine. But I went into Austin, Texas, because they're based out of Austin. I went to their convention, Steve Jackson Games, finally, after 35 or 40 years in business, finally had their first convention in 2019, just before the pandemic, and it was called FNORDCon. And FNORD, it's a Steve Jackson thing. It stands for no other reason, damn it. I don't know why, but that's just a thing that they... Anyway, so they had their convention, and I went to the convention because I also had some friends in Austin that I hadn't seen in a while, so again, it was a bit of a double dip. And I played a beta of the game. That's the main reason I went to this convention, is because I wanted to play the beta of Car Wars. And I was sitting there at the table with people there were people there who were younger than me by a good deal, but there were also guys about my same old age. And I could see as we were playing and learning the game that they were just like, this is not like it was back in the day. And I understand that. The fact of the matter is you can still play the old game if you want to, But like they wanted to be excited about it, but I could see some of them were just like, but it's not the same. But I think it's cool. I'm looking forward to playing it, and I'm having a good time, at least so far, starting to paint the miniatures. So that's cool too. And then the other game that I got, and again, I don't 100% know if Steve Jackson Games needed to do a Kickstarter for this, because they're a big company that's been around, not a huge company, but they're a good-sized company that's been around long enough. I'm not sure. They teeter on the edge there, I think, to some degree. Lord knows I don't think that they need to do a Kickstarter every time they come out with a new version of Munchkin. That's for sure. But this has got a lot of plastic parts and stuff like that. Okay, fine. The other Kickstarter that I did recently receive, I received it yesterday, was my pledge from Gaddis Gaming, which was a game called Empire's Fall, which is a alternate history kind of World War II game. And so, I'm friends with Lee from Gaddis Gaming, so I wanted to help support the Kickstarter, and B, I like alternate history stuff, and so the pledge that I got, it's also a skirmish game too, basically. So you have it's smaller than Bolt Action. Like, you still have one of the two forces does have a tank, but the other one doesn't. But I think we have a power armor guy, but they, it's good. So, but again, those are the last two outstanding things I had coming from Kickstarter. They showed up almost exactly the same day, like a day apart, and I don't see myself pulling the trigger too much on that right now. You can't talk about squirrels without talking about food. Oh, right, I was talking about. Well, I didn't start it, but somebody else was talking about eating squirrels. So you're right. We did get to a culinary thing. That's true. Well, we all eat, right? I'm assuming so. What is the name of the game you developed? I missed the episode where you talked about it. It's called Rain and Hell. It's right here. And we actually released the expansion for it, which was basically, it's just PDF only. It's not a book, but you can get this as PDF or a book, or actually you can get it as PDF and a book. But the expansion is PDF only, and it's called Oculus Spear, and it is a solo play and co-op play expansion with a 6-scenario story. So you basically play each scenario separately. You can go to rainandhellgame.com and then check it out there. But that came out. The expansion came out 3 weeks ago, I think, about that. So yeah, it's been going well. That's been going well. We've been real happy with it. But the expansion was something we hadn't planned, but because of the way that things have gone with COVID and all that kind of stuff, and it's still continuing to go, we kind of thought by now things would be better, but so we wanted to add the solo play / co-op play component to the game so that you could do that. Our next game going forward is going to have solo play and co-op play built in, so not 100% sure, but there's a good chance that maybe the next game doesn't even need an expansion. We're not all about making expansions. Like, our next game is going to be a totally different game. It's going to be sci-fi based. Like I said, it's going to be starting with solo and co-op. Yeah, we're not going to be like, we made this one game and now we're just going to release expansions for it and do all that kind of stuff. We want to release a game this year and a game next year and a game the year after that, and hopefully one of those you'll like. Maybe you'll like all of them, but maybe you'll be like, oh, okay, well, demons and I don't know, but this one's got like, oh, lasers. That's pretty cool. So that's kind of the idea that we're looking at too. But the next one will also be miniatures agnostic, so you use whatever kind of miniatures you want. We're not going to make miniatures for it. How similar is Car Wars to Gaslands? The new version is I wouldn't say similar. Like I said, it's got that cool kind of speedometer sort of thing where you can track all your stuff and your damage and everything, which is a nice thing that sometimes it'd be nice if something like Car Wars had maybe a little bit. Or sorry, not Car Wars, Gaslands. I'm going to be getting those screwed up all the time now. It is more expensive because they're selling you the whole shooting match, right? Like they're selling you the cars, they're selling you the little plates the cars go on, they're selling you all that stuff. Whereas Gaslands can be, well, it used to be a $20 book. Now it's a bit more expensive, but it's a thicker, nicer hardcover. Gaslands Refueled is what it's called. But the upside to Gaslands is then you get to buy miniatures, Matchbox cars, Hot Wheel cars, paint them and do all that kind of stuff and whatever. If you're interested in Car Wars is all about like, here's all the stuff nearly that you need in the box. Technically, the play space does not come in the box, but they do sell 3x3 mats that you could use, or there's other companies obviously that use mats, or you could just mark off an area on your table that's 3 foot by 3 foot and you're fine. I would say the mechanics are maybe a touch easier overall than Gaslands. Also, Gaslands has got like kind of that whole like we're doing the Gaslands is like this whole kind of like, oh, it's about Mars and these different factions and all that kind of stuff. Car Wars doesn't really seem to have much of that. Car Wars is about, I think it takes place in roughly 2070 or so, and it is mostly generally arena combat, but it's the way that at least America has kind of moved so that auto dueling, basically getting into gunfights out on the roads amongst, like whatever, that seems to be mostly legal in about, like, I think Texas and a couple other states secede, and then there's some stuff, so there's only like 47 states left. They've got a whole thing in the big front cover, inside cover of the book that basically has like a timeline of how we got to where we are. So there's not too much story. There's a little bit though. But I'm looking forward to being able to play it again. Like I said, I enjoyed the beta, and I enjoyed the old game. It's going to be a very different experience now, but I'm looking forward to it. Honestly, it reminds me a little bit of Star Wars X-Wing. So if you like Star Wars X-Wing, I feel like you'd like this too. So. I support a lot of the STL Kickstarters as everything is digital, so you get your file within a few weeks. Love having 3D printers. Yeah, I mean, that's a real nice benefit to doing that kind of stuff, certainly. Car Wars and trucks and helicopters and boats and tanks. Yeah, back in the day, that they released expansions for boats and tanks and helicopters and all kinds of stuff. So far, they've only really got any talk about doing just these cars for the new version. I like sliding dials, something pleasing about the tactile nature of those things. It's just nice because the stuff doesn't, like, because there's like little trenches for the little bits to go into, it's not like you bump the card and everything slides because it's all sort of stuck in there. It was a smart idea. When I played the beta, they did not have those designed yet. They had like printed out things of what they basically look like, but you had to sort of keep everything in line, and that was obviously sketchy. But it was beta, so it's a Discordian thing. It's true. You can read the Principia Discordia online. I own a copy because Steve Jackson Games used to sell a copy of the Principia Discordia, I believe. Nord comes from the old Illuminati books, which they turned into a game. They also reprinted the Principia Discordia, which also has ties to the Illuminati books. It's true. When the FBI remember when the FBI raided Steve Jackson Games offices because of their old message board? Yes, I do. Yeah, sometime in the early 90s, I think, the FBI raided Steve Jackson Games because of their old message board, and also because they were working on a game called Hackers, or was it the GURPS expansion for Hackers? I don't remember, but they had this game called Hackers. It was like a card game that came in like a box. And they were doing some other stuff, and then the FBI came in and like took all their computers and raided their offices in Austin or wherever they are, and they almost went out of business because they didn't have any stuff and they couldn't do anything, and it was just a whole thing. I think they did maybe eventually get their stuff back, but then again, maybe they didn't. I don't remember actually. Let's see here. Are we finally rising up and overthrowing Kickstarter? Asks the noob painter. No, I just was I'm talking about how the last two outstanding things that I ordered on Kickstarter finally showed up, basically within a day of each other, and that was Car Wars and Empire's Fall. Empire's Fall, I'm pretty sure, was on time. Car Wars was not, but COVID and Steve Jackson. But I do see myself not doing. I mean, I've been cutting back on Kickstarter for a while now, just because. Here's another good reason that I've been cutting back on Kickstarter. I don't need a lot more miniatures or just stuff in general. You can certainly ask my wife. I don't. So, and that's what happens sometimes is you're like, well, this is such a good deal. I can't afford not to. And you do it and you don't think about it for 2 years. And all of a sudden a box shows up in your cubicle at work that blocks the entire door to your cubicle. And you're like, the hell is that? And then you find out it's a 27-pound box of cardboard when you backed Ogre back in 2010 or whenever. No, 2012? I don't remember. It was a long time ago. It took forever for Ogre to show up. But when it did, it came in a box that was way bigger than I expected. And then when I got it home, I'm like, well, where am I going to store this? And I thought, oh, I know, I'll keep it underneath the bed in the guest room upstairs, and it doesn't fit. It's too tall. So now it takes up a weird spot in a closet in the guest room that means I can't put other stuff. It's a thing. So part of another reason that I'm also trying to dial back on that stuff in general is just because I don't particularly need that much more stuff, but also Kickstarters in general, I think, are going to slow down because of all the shipping issues and all that jazz. It's all tying together. And if I see small companies that are like, hey, I'm doing a Kickstarter for some... If I see a small company that's doing a Kickstarter for some STLs they're going to produce, unless they're struggling... If they're struggling, then maybe I'll pull the trigger. But honestly, I'll probably just wait until they sell the STLs afterwards. I think it would be dumb of them to be like, nope, we did it for the Kickstarter and you can't buy the STLs now. Like, why? You get, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. If it's a digital product, you have an infinite number of them, basically. So, that's one of the reasons why I don't do a lot of the. I do like one. No, do I even do one? No, I don't. I was gonna do one Patreon to support a sculptor that does STL stuff, but instead I generally just kind of a la carte pick and choose from My Mini Factory, because nearly every sculptor out there that's using Patreon, well, a lot of them are actually switching over to My Mini Factory has their own kind of version of Patreon just for 3D sculptors called Tribes. And so if you use that as a sculptor, then you get some benefits, and it's much easier to just go from like, I'm using this as my Patreon now. They're taking less money than Patreon does. They ship out all the stuff, all the files and everything to the people every month automatically. I don't have to mess with that. And then the stuff gets put into My Mini Factory so that people can buy it a la carte. I still generally buy stuff a la carte. I'll see somebody who's like, I really like their stuff, but I'm going to buy this stuff a la carte. I haven't come across the sculptor yet where I'm like, I want all 20 or whatever many pieces they put out every month, but there's probably some, but I just haven't come across them yet. But I am going to be signing up for, I was actually going to do it yesterday, but then I got sidetracked by painting tiny little Car Wars cars. I am signing up for One Page Rules for their Patreon. And I know you do get some miniatures and stuff like that, but that's not the main reason I'm doing it. I kind of want to access the Army Builder thing and all that kind of stuff, which is just through Patreon. So anyway, long story short, I don't see myself doing too many Kickstarters for a good while, probably. But if I do, it's going to be for hopefully more digital products that I don't have to worry about sitting on a boat outside of a harbor for 6 months or that kind of stuff. So there's that. So rising up and overthrowing Kickstarter, no. You can do that by just not buying things on Kickstarter, I find. Let's see here. I still have my Car Wars Pocket version, a little snappy black plastic case. It's true. I played after that. I played when you bought it and it came in a cardboard box and you got fold-out maps and big 8.5 by 11 sheets of little printed, rectangles that had cars on them, and you used the scissors and cut out the one you wanted, and that's what you used. I think my earliest ones, the cars were black and white, but then I bought another box later on, and the cars were in color. Of course, and I should have had one here, but now they're like, they're like Hot Wheels size plastics, which is cool. Let's see here. Sci-fi Skirmish, you have my attention. Yes, that's the plan for the next game. We're beyond just Sci-fi Skirmish, but we're just basically at this point sharing Sci-fi Skirmish, model agnostic again, of course, and solo and co-op are going to be built in from the get. So let's see here. Always a good Sunday watching this and painting. Well, good to hear. I have some Blood Red Skies Spitfires I've 3D printed and getting camo on them. Great for a skirmish game in the air. I've seen that demoed. I don't know if I saw it at Adepticon. I know I saw it at Gen Con. I might have seen it demoed also at Dragon Con, which actually I'm going to in 2 weeks. Dragon Con is a small miniatures convention that's taking place in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin this year. And our own moderator, Matt, is running all of the charity stuff for it because it's a predominantly for charity convention through Extra Life, Child's Play, both of those things, I think. But yeah. Just got whatever Car Wars edition came out in the bundle of holding a few years ago. Nice. Let's see here. Hearing about Car Wars, is sad I ignored it. Well, the downside is that, and this is a Kickstarter thing, but it's really an exacerbated Kickstarter thing now. I'm 98% sure I paid about $150 for the set that I got of Car Wars through the Kickstarter, plus shipping, of course. But currently, boop. What happened? Why did that go away? Oh, because I closed it. Okay, now it's back. Yeah, so this is the Car Wars Double Ace box that I pulled the trigger on, and it currently sells, I believe, yes, it says right here, $375. Now, it's a big box, and it's full of stuff, don't get me wrong. That all being said, it's still $375. The box is literally a foot cube, I think. It's big. But I think it was $150 on the Kickstarter. Now, part of this much higher price now is because of the supply chain issues and the shipping and all this kind of stuff. I'm sure that they're trying to recoup some of their costs because they couldn't come back to the Kickstarter folks, a year late or nearly a year late and go, oh, by the way, we need to charge you an extra $100 because, as it turns out, the shipping container that we were planning on and budgeting for was 5 times as much to get it than we thought, and that's what's happening kind of worldwide. So, yeah. But anyway, I guess we'll see. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's one of those situations where the FOMO, I guess, is a bit real, I would pay good money for a Tabletop Minions and 52 Minis podcast. Oh, 52 Miniatures podcast. I don't know how we would do that, I guess. I guess we could use something like Zencastr. I don't know. I've not been a... I've thought about trying to do a podcast. I mean, I obviously do a podcast right now with Game 4 Matt, for the Game 4 podcast. If you're interested, definitely check out the Game 4 podcast, either here on YouTube or through your favorite podcast provider. Every 2 weeks, we talk about just tabletop gaming stuff, to help make your tabletop gaming better, etc. But yeah, I don't know. I know there's a lot of other, obviously there's Scott and John from Trapped Under Plastic. And I know that Brent and... shoot, no, I can't think of his first name, and I sound like a jerk. It's eBay Miniature Rescues, and I can't think of his first name. Shoot, I've met him. We talked at Las Vegas Open in 2020, I think, or 2019. Anyway, I know they do a podcast called Paint Bravely. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But yeah, so, and Sam and I have talked about trying to do something, but I don't know what it would be about. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what... There's also a situation of time. You know what I mean? That's also a thing too. How much extra time have I got? Hacker was a standalone game. It was a standalone game, but I think they were also working on a GURPS not expansion, but a GURPS supplement, I think, for Hacker as well. But I don't remember exactly. Let's see here. Need a friend with a 3D printer. Yeah. What's the secret on My Money Factory? The website is a kind of a mess. You type in what you're looking for into the search field. That's what I do. If I'm like honestly, early on as we were working on Rain and Hell, I'm like, I need to have some models that are cool, that are not Games Workshop models, that I can paint and then photograph and then have Artist Empire do the amazing digital paint over stuff and all that jazz. And so I went to My Mini Factory and just typed in Demon and then just started scrolling through. I find the trick is if you want the better stuff, there's a checkbox over on the side that says show me. I think it's right. They may call them premium models, and they're just models that are not free. Because a lot of the free stuff on that site, just like with Thingiverse, not great. Some of them are fine. Some things are cool, but there's a lot of free stuff that's free for a reason. But when you say, I'm willing to pay for a model, then you go through there and you find way better stuff. And a lot of that stuff is stuff that is part of some sculptor's Patreon, and now it's a month or two later, and then they put up the pieces all separately on My Mini Factory, and so you're like, oh, well, I didn't need to pay $10 a month to get 20 plus models. I just needed that guy or these 2 or 3 guys, so I'll just buy them, a la carte from My Mini Factory. So I use it all the time. It's been really great. I don't know if it's been asked, but the new Car Wars be available on retail? Yes. Well, like I said, kind of expensive, but yes. Paolo Parente announced that Dust Studios were going out of business due to the pandemic. Domino effect. I remember their Kickstarter scandal with Battlefront. I don't remember a Kickstarter scandal, but I probably just didn't pay attention to that. I did see the thing that Dust Studios was shutting down, and that's a bummer. I liked Dust Warfare, which was a rule set written by Andy Chambers and Mac Martin. Andy Chambers is Andy Chambers, one of the original guys that started out at building the 40K rule set, and Mac Martin was one of the main writers on Malifaux in the early days. I'm not sure what he's doing these days. Anyway, but they wrote for Fantasy Flight Games. They wrote there was Dust Tactics, which was a little bit more board gamey. It was much more of a grid. And then Dust Warfare came out, and it was more of a regular miniatures game, like on a 3-foot by 3-foot or 4-foot by 4-foot board. And that I loved. I loved that. And I bought a bunch of models, and I played that, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And then it became a whole thing, and then it went to a different company, and then eventually Paolo got it back, Dust, and then all that kind of stuff. So the normal Dust game, Dust 1947, which was the new version, again, on the grid thing, I just don't like that grid combat. But you could also play it as a regular miniatures game as well. But there was something about the rules, I just didn't like them as much. And so that was a bummer because I really liked the miniatures. I mean, the miniatures were cool. The concept is cool. This whole alternate history, thing. They added in, once it came back to Dust Studios, they added in Cthulhu's and all kinds of stuff and everything like that. And is it Cthulhu? No, probably not. Yeah, it was very cool. But I just the way I wanted to play it, the version that they made, Dust 1947, not on a grid, just didn't quite, as a rule set, speak to me. And I'm one of those people that the rule set's very important. I know there are people out there that'll play any old game as long as they like the models, and that's fine. But I'm not one of those people. I generally like to. The rules are important, and so that's what kept me from playing the game, unfortunately. So. It was a bummer to hear about that, though. Let's see here. Just backed my first Kickstarter a few weeks ago, the Masters of the Universe board game, mainly for the figures. I heard about that. You said Dragon Con, and I was like, can't wait to see there, but I thought you meant... Oh, sorry, no, Dragon Fall. Did I say Dragon Con? I meant Dragon Fall. Wait, you have a podcast? Well, I mean, I don't have a podcast. My day job, I work for a company called Milk Can, and we made an app called Game 4, which is currently, we're working on the new version of it. It's still kind of hibernated because it is a app literally about getting tabletop gamers to come together and be able to play together, except that, pandemic. But we're working on bringing it back. We hibernated it back in July of 2020. That being said, we started in June of 2019 making a podcast every 2 weeks where we talked about not just the app, that would be really boring, but we just talked about like ways to make your tabletop gaming better and how to like start a group and how to like, this and that. And we've had we just did the 60-second episode last week. So yeah, if you just go to your Google or your whatever your podcasty machine is that you use and just type in Gamefor, GAMEFOR, and you'll probably find us. And then you can subscribe, which is free, or you could follow us. You could also check us out on YouTube. We also we used to you used to be able to see us, and that was just a lot of extra work. So now we just because we were also recording from home, we would each be at home, so there was no good way to do that for a while. So we put it on YouTube so people can listen to it on YouTube if they want to. It's also easier to comment and all that stuff. But you can also listen to it through your normal podcasty machine, so that's fun too. GURPS, generic universal role-playing system. In truth, yes. What's GURPS? Yeah, it was Steve Jackson Games. They still make it. It's their kind of generic role-playing system. So there was GURPS, and then they made dozens, if not hundreds, of supplement books. So if you wanted to play GURPS Space or GURPS like Japanese historical whatever, or GURPS just so many different books. I owned GURPS Space. That was a really interesting kind of add-on book, and I also owned GURPS Illuminati, which was also fun. So there's that. Hey Zambies, how you doing? Regular viewer here from Wales. Love your content. Have you checked out the rules for Battle Companies by GW? The Middle-earth equivalent of Kill Team / Warcry. Middle-earth equivalent of Battle... I have not even heard of that. Battle Companies from GW. I will have to check it out. Yeah, no, I mean, because I would like to... If there was like a Warcry version or something like that, but it was the Lord of the Rings stuff, that's piques my interest. If the rules are cool, then I would be interested. But yeah, I mean, technically, well, I was going to say technically, like Skirmish battle game, the normal Lord of the Rings game doesn't require a ton of models. They did make an add-on or a separate game or whatever called War of the Ring, which was all about like, hey, look, I've got a lot of models. And I was not interested in that, obviously. But even the strategy battle game is still, it's more models than I might like. And so, yeah, I'll check out Battle Companies, though. Is it something like just like a free download? That doesn't seem like GW these days, but maybe it is. I'll have to check it out. Have I played Black Seas? I have not. I was interested in Dust, but when you go to the website multiple times over in the last 2 years, and every time every single model you like is sold out, it doesn't bode well for the system. They would have good-sized booths full of lots of product and generally lots of people at conventions like Adepticon and Gen Con, which is expensive, but it seemed like it was moving. But yeah, you're right. If that stuff's all tied up in the booth and it's not something you can buy and get at a local store or get even directly from them, that is a bit of a bummer. Can anyone recommend some good pre-painted terrain? Monster Fight Club is pretty good. They make some really nice stuff if you're looking for like trees and things like that. If you're looking for more like ruins and things like that, I would take a look at Gale Force 9 is also a good place to start. Both of them are good ones. Finally caught a show live. Just got Mantic's Armada and super excited about that. Cool. Nice. GURPS historical books are great and very historically accurate. Yeah, they made a zillion different types of books there. Just popped over to Game4 here on YouTube and subscribed to check it out. Nice. Good to hear, Tony. Thank you. Molly says every source book for every game is a GURPS source book. It's sort of, yes, that's true. I mean, you can do that. Moderator Matt says, whoops, had a little nap there for a bit. Well, I can understand that. I make people sleepy. Let's see here. Battle Companies is a book on the GW web store. That does make more sense, sure. Would give something else to use the Lord of the Rings miniatures for. I've just been using a few to convert up for some Asher Militarum. Oh, that's kind of cool. The only models that I own for them are it was a box that had basically like Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas. those three in like one box, and it was called something like the Hunters or something like that. And I bought that because I was like, I'm gonna probably use those guys for something else, but they're cool models. I don't know that I own any other Lord of the Rings models. Well, I own some of the terrain. They had the Lake Town terrain, which are just great little houses and stuff like that. I bought those. Thought on Conflict 47, I think it's underrated. I would love to play Conflict 47 because, again, it's alternate history. It's not just World War II, it's World War II-ish, or ish, but with like laser tanks and werewolves and power armor and stuff like that. Main issue is I just have a hard time finding, like there's nobody around here that really plays. I've got a couple of friends that bought starter boxes, but I don't know that anything has gone forward on that. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Let's see here. Conflict 47 is fantastic. Going to use the skirmish rules from Bolt Action and add in fantasy monsters. Ooh, that sounds fun. Lord of the Rings models are kind of small for mixing with other lines. I'm okay with there being a little bit of a size variance because sometimes people are short, or sometimes people are very tall. You know what I mean? Like, it's if I'm within about a head height, it's fine. I got a friend who's 6'6", you know, and he's a good deal taller, and you know my wife is 5 foot like 1 or 2, so you know there's definitely size variance. I can deal with that. When you get to a certain point, like taking a 28 millimeter, like a true scale kind of 28 millimeter model, and then putting them next to like a Marvel 40 millimeter, then that becomes a big difference, and maybe more than. But going between 28 to, or even 25, let's say, maybe to like, I don't know, 32 or whatever, is just like, well, this guy's just tall, you know, or short, whatever the deal is, it's fine. Can you recommend any games that aren't centered around combat? I love skirmish games, but it's hard to convince my friends to play them since they don't care for combat-focused games. No. I guess I haven't seen anything quite... Well, There's a game called Ethereum, or Aetherium. It's A-E-Therium. I don't know exactly how it's... I know it definitely starts with an A-E, and then goes from there. At least I think that's what it's called. I remember that game had a hacking component to it. Like, there was you had a board where there was some stuff going on, and there was another board where there was, like, hacking going on. You had, like... this is my avatar, but again, you're kind of just fighting in the internet versus fighting, you know. So yeah, I don't see a lot of games like that. I guess maybe the football games, the sports games, Blood Bowl might be a good play. I mean, it's violent, but it's not shooting. Blood Bowl, Blitz Bowl is another game you could also. That's also about Games Workshop, but it's something you mainly only find at Barnes and Noble. It's a smaller version of the game, but yeah, that's something like one of those sports-oriented games. Guild Ball's not around anymore, but yeah, maybe Blood Bowl would be the way to go, especially if they like sports. It's basically fantasy football, but you know, fantasy in that it's got orcs and dwarves and junk like that in it. All right, folks. Well, it's 11 o'clock in my neck of the woods, and I gotta go do some things, and then go over to the in-laws for lunch and stuff like that, and then I'm gonna paint some more Car Wars cars tonight. Work on some more of those and see how that goes. Maybe I'll share some of that stuff on Instagram. You can follow me there if you want to. But thank you very much for coming by and hanging out today. Again, I think that Kickstarter is a great thing for what it's meant for, which is small creators who don't have the ability to fund the idea that they have unless they can get, you know, this stuff through Kickstarter. But I would be wary of Kickstarter for a while because supply issues are going to be a thing industry-wide, worldwide, really. So keep an eye on that as well. So I think I might be back here in a week because I think I need to get the schedule back on track that got goofed up by Gen Con, because otherwise I'm going to have to screw it up anyway because of going to Dragonfall on the 22nd of October. So I'll let you guys know. But yeah, there may be an every Sunday show next week, and then we'll go back to the every 2 weeks thing, and get that schedule back on track. So I want to thank everybody for coming by again, and hope you have a good rest of your weekend, unless you're over on the other side of the planet where it's already Monday. And so I hope you have a good week. And maybe I'll see you on Twitch later on. Well, for me, later on tomorrow. Thank you for watching.